Thank you everyone for joining. I am very grateful that everyone showed up today to talk about something quite vulnerable and pretty hard to talk about and has been stigmatized in our society since time immemorial. It's about money and financial health and financial wellness. And what does that even mean? So over 90% of people in the US feel some level of financial stress. It's the second leading cause of divorce. It is a huge cause for a tremendous amount of other aspects of illness. So today, I'm hoping we can actually take a moment and figure out what is financial wellness? How do we actually change our mindset to start to think about our finances in a much healthier way so we can actually take control and become a lot more confident in how we talk about ourselves so that we can actually really identify money as a tool to help us live our lives better and not actually be shamed or feel the stigma that society has sometimes put on us around money. So here's an agenda for today. I don't know if anybody here was able to come to the annual summit that WITI put on, where I talked a little bit about money and transitioning our thoughts about money. I don't know if anyone could raise your hand or just let me know if you've been there, but thank you. Last time in the annual summit, we talked a lot about taking a step toward mastering your money mindset and shifting your perspective on money as a goal. Actually not thinking of it as a goal, but thinking of it as a tool. So if money is your tool, what is it a tool to achieve? And the other thing we talked about during the annual summit was discussing financial joy and recognizing if money is your tool to help you live your life better, then the task that you have is figuring out what is it that you really enjoy? What are the things that you want money to use? So this time, we're going to have a slightly different agenda. We'll talk a little bit about understanding your money emotions that is. We'll talk a little bit about your personal values and money and how they interrelate. And I'll leave you with some tips on how you might want to align your choices, your financial choices, and your values. And I can't see anybody in my windows. So I don't know if David, you can, but if anyone wants to just come off of mute and interrupt me at any time, please do send some notes in the chat. If you have any questions, feel free. It'd be great if this is as interactive as possible. This is a safe space. I think this is third or fourth talk I've done for WITI, and I think the ground rules are always the same. We're here to actually find the support of a community, to talk about something that's a little bit harder to talk about, and to help each other achieve our goals. WITI is about, and what this session is also going to be about, empowerment and empowering you to actually learn something here, derive some insight, and then go off on your way feeling a little bit better and feeling a little bit more confident in how you can actually apply some of the lessons learned here. But as we've had in other conversations here, people open up and talk about all kinds of things, and this is a welcome space for that. Okay, so I'll move on to the next one. I talked a little bit about wellness and what really wellness is. So I gave already a couple of scary facts about how many people feel money stress. So in the US, unfortunately, females lag far behind men, where 50% of women have no retirement savings by the age of 55. 62% of women have less than $1,000 in savings. But these stats are shifting dramatically. And why is that? That is what a lot of people talk about as this intergenerational transfer of wealth. So women are earning more, they're more educated, they are the beneficiaries of inheritance. And what we're also seeing, how does that apply to this conversation? As we talk about financial health, we talk about how can women actually really build up their own relationship with money. This image that you're looking at, which I'm seeing now is a little bit blurry, sorry about that. really highlights, you might be familiar with it. It's a wellness wheel. It's kind of well known in the realms of mental health and physical health and all of these things we kind of talk about. There's all these different components of wellness. And each spoke of this wheel interacts and impacts the others. So financial health impacts your mental health, your relationship health, your occupational health, your social health. And when the financial spoke is broken, it's really hard to find health in all of the other areas. So in order to find holistic wellness, you really need to kind of be operating with all of these in harmony. And of course, there's going to be different variables where some are up, some are down, but it requires kind of this bigger high level view. So I'm sharing this image as a reminder that when you think about money as a tool and you stop chasing it as a goal, you're actually in a better position and a better mindset to start taking control over how you perceive money and what you actually could be doing to help it achieve your own goals. So money beliefs are broadly defined as the story we tell ourselves about money. And our money beliefs come from years of history and what you saw in your family, and it could come from trauma, and it could come from your experiences of your earlier life. And when you shift that mindset and you think about, okay, how do I recognize some of those money beliefs, the stories that you tell yourself about money, and shift to focus on what you want it to do for you, then you actually force yourself into defining how are you going to use that tool to achieve your future. And one of the parts of this is just kind of a recap a little bit of the talk we did during the summit. One of the important parts of using money as a tool is getting to know who is future you. Like if you were going to do a little fun experiment as a takeaway here and write a postcard to yourself today from future you, where is that future you? Where is she? Who's she with? Does she have pets around her? Does she have family around her? Is she on a beach? Is she in the mountains? Is she working? Is she not working? Is she, what kind of a lifestyle is she leading? What kind of restaurants does she enjoy? Does she prefer staying home and cooking for herself? What are her hobbies? What are her interests? So the clearer you can get that vision of future you, the more that question of what is money a tool for me to achieve becomes a little bit less blurry. So when you kind of really focus your energy on who is that person in the future, yourself, you can actually help with that. The other part that we talked about a little bit last time is start with what brings you joy. So future you is a whole exercise, but if you just start with, hey, in the last month, in the last 3 months, what did you do that really, really brought you joy? Where you thought, I am fully living right now in this moment. I'm experiencing joy, and I know that this is the kind of thing that I love to do. So we're going to transition on. That was a bit of a recap. Now into kind of today's talk. I do have a question for everyone, and I'm hoping to make this a bit of interactive. So before we dive into money and values, I would love to learn, just if anybody's open to come off of mute to understand, and you can share a name of a person or a relationship you have with a person. Who do you talk to about money? And if anybody is open to share, who do you talk to about money?
I talked to two of my best friends, one of which I think is at a more advanced stage of understanding money than I am.
Amazing. And does she have like a financial career or something, or she just has a different level of
Uh,
experience?
yeah, I think I went through graduate school and postdoc training, all this. So I had a delay before I was able to really recognize money and having a 401k, whereas she has a career where she was able to do that a lot earlier. So just her experience in managing money, she's had a longer time to understand what she needs to do.
Awesome. And I see some people that have put some notes in the chat, and I love who is this? Samantha, who said definitely not my father. That's awesome. I wonder, I resonate with that. That's my father is actually a financial advisor, so that's pretty funny. My kids, fantastic. Samantha, you said my tax lady. That's a good one. You should definitely talk to them about your money. So your financial professionals, husband, kids, financial advisor. Anybody
Hey,
else want to chime in?
yeah. Hey, Marla, I would say, based on our interactions, actually, really shifting the conversation from what about money to what do you want money to do for you? And how can it be a tool instead of like an end goal? So that's been so helpful in our work together, just in the young people in my life to be able to say, think about what you want to accomplish as a result of the money that you have and not how much money do you do you want to earn. So a little bit more qualitative approach than quantitative approach, and that's all due to your stewardship and your leadership, so I really appreciate that.
Wow, thank you for that, Kathleen. That's great. And just changing the conversation is what I'm hearing. Like you have a totally different conversation when you're not like, "Hey, how are we going to afford this?" It's like, "Hey, what do we actually need?" Amazing. Does anybody else want to chime in on either the comments you put on the chat or who you speak to about money?
I can talk about kids because my 18-year-old has been applying to college. And so for a while, we had a very different philosophy with my husband. I would say, all of your dreams, we'll make sure they'll come true. You want to go to Brown for 80,000? Sure, we can somehow make it happen. Where my husband would say, you don't want to go into debt. Like you don't. You can get your bachelor's at a state school. So we talked about money all the time, but in the major, of course, right? You studied computer science versus you studied something else. And we changed the conversation. And I said, listen, you don't need to have a lot of money to be happy. It's all about your wants and how you want to live your life. And so if you want to travel the world, there are also ways to do it on the cheaper side rather than luxury side. So you decide, but it has to be realistic.
Yeah,
You can't just go blah, whatever. Like,
right.
and so now she talks about not only making money at 18. I did not talk about investing money. She talks about saving. She talks about investment. She talks about passive income. And she also decided by herself that she doesn't want to be in debt.
That's awesome.
And so
That's a great
when
lesson.
choosing school, she'll choose the one that will allow you to have zero debt.
Wow. Fantastic. Anyone else want to chime in on who you trust with money, or we'll move on? Because this is a follow-on question. And the reason I'm curious about this question is because of how vulnerable money is as a topic. And even in the comments, we saw some people that had some, emotion come up when you even asked the question, who do you talk to about money? And I think super interesting that I would say most of you shared that you talk to family or best friends about money. So I would wonder if I just pause for a moment and say, those people that you talk to about money, on a scale of 1 to 5, how much do you trust them? And I'm not going to define trust here. You define it in your own context. But how much do you trust the people that you talk to about money? Anyone want to chime in or put in the chat? 5, high trust. Fantastic. Anyone else? Awesome. Okay. Anybody want to share? So I actually feel I have a very high bar for trust. And I feel like there's very few people I talk to about money. And I would say for me, like it's very hard to get to a 5. 5 is kind of unachievable. Especially like I may trust somebody with all of my deepest, darkest secrets. It doesn't mean I trust them about money or certainly about making the right financial decisions for me. And I think that's kind of the spirit with which I'm asking the question. But great to see. I don't know if there's no other comments, I'll move on. Anyone else want to chime in on how much do you trust the people that you're talking to about money? Okay.
I think if you were to talk about the inverse of that, is like like someone said, definitely not my father. For me, it's definitely not my mother. The trust is not just like letting people know what you have and what you're doing with it, but also kind of protecting yourself from them exploiting you and, you know, maybe taking advantage. So, like I rated my friend a 5 because I know that, or I feel that she would never use that information against me, that she would use it in order to build me up. And so that's why I would rank her higher and not like list some people here, because I would be worried about what they're going to do with the information that I am sharing with them.
Interesting. I love that you say that. And I'll just share a stat with you. This is Forrester research that 98% of financial services brands are distrusted. People actually, everything that you just said with respect to your best friend, she won't exploit you. She's not going to use this information against you. People don't have that level of trust in their bank, in their financial advisor, in their insurance company, but primarily their banks. The financial services industry has done a pretty poor job at building deep, deep trust. And we have several examples fresh in mind, unfortunately, of where they have led us astray. They have sold us inappropriate and unsuitable products. They have sold us things we might not have clearly understood. And so, as a result of that, the industry with whom we are supposed to build trust to deliver into us has really struggled in the exact thing that we need most of them, because money in and of itself is trust. So interesting fact there around financial services, and thank you for sharing that. I'll chat a little bit now about money and values. And so this is just a collection of imagery here, with this narrative of you invariably, when you're going about your daily life, you are always aligning your financial choices with your values. So if you just think about how you spent money last month. So here's some images that might spark you to think about, how did I spend money last month? You know, was it on entertainment, restaurants, travel, gifts, self-care, shopping? So go back to the things, that evaluation of what brings you joy in your life and this concept of money as a tool to bring you joy. And then pause and think through, what were you spending money on? And which of those things truly brought you joy? So let's pause here again and ask for people to come off of mute and share out when you kind of are forced to think about your values in line with how you spent your money. Where do you reflect back and say, here's the things that I spent my money on that truly brought me joy, or the categories? Any thoughts?
For me, it's definitely travel. I think when I was young, I associated travel with just happiness and fun, and I still do that today. So a lot of my money goes to just new experiences and traveling to new places.
Love that.
Hi, Marla. It's Colleen. I just wanted to say, starting a business and putting all your money into the business creates a different type of financial. But the great joy is if once the project is complete or the business is operational, that brings great joy. And then you kind of go, my money was invested in fixing a major problem, and it's a little bit of money, and how that grows in investment hopefully is well rewarded. I hear it all the time. You should be rewarded for all your work in your project, because it's been a struggle. And I think a lot of that is putting the money where you think it's going to grow the most. That's it for me. So thank you.
Yeah, I love that. And I'll add another kind of flavor to what you're saying. So you're saying you actually found joy in investing in your business. And I would add it's probably also you're investing in yourself. You're investing in your your belief in yourself to actually build something. You're a creator, you're an entrepreneur. And when you double down and put your money where your mouth is and say, I believe in myself so much, I'm going to put my own money there, it brings you joy. Awesome. Luba, you're sharing, it brings you joy to invest money into sponsorships of women who want to grow professionally. Fantastic. So your values are kind of reflected in your support of women and women's growth. That's awesome. For me, I actually just went on a ski trip with my daughter, and I tell her every year, we don't go very often, and I say, this is what brings me joy. I'm very happy to spend money on a ski trip because it is the thing that brings me more joy than anything to just be connected with her. Awesome. Taking care of those in need and the connection back to values. And when I do those things, I feel joy. Okay. We'll move on.
Marla, I'll add that for me, what brings me joy is spending money on my wellness. So I spend lots of money on yoga classes, yoga memberships, also supplements. But I know that when I invest in all this, not only do I show up better as a person, but I show up more in, more productive for my work as well.
Awesome. And that brings you joy. Like, kind of being your full healthy self is something that brings you joy. And knowing that I used my money to better myself, it sounds like brings you joy. So you can contribute potentially. It's all kind of this cycle. Awesome.
Yep, absolutely.
Love it. Anyone else on how you spend money in alignment with your values? Okay, we'll move on to investing your money. All right. So I'm going to get a little bit geeky for just 2 slides, and then we'll go back to kind of fluffy. Because I think money is a combination of the two. But if you think about how your money is invested, and you're all here as part of Women in Tech International, you're probably come from some sort of a tech background or related. You probably have some investments. There's a lot of people in America who do not. But I'm going to talk about, for those of you who have money invested in some way. So investing in companies is a very great way to accumulate wealth. Assets that accumulate are primarily in our society, companies. You own pieces of companies, or you own real estate. In our world, that's generally how you accumulate wealth. Today we'll talk about investing companies and how you might want to align that type of decision framework around your values. So most of you probably own broad-based ETFs, exchange traded funds or mutual funds, maybe in your retirement accounts, your 401k, your IRA, your 403b, or in a brokerage account or an advisor managed account. They might have invested on your behalf into a fund. And a lot of those big funds track a popular index. So the S&P 500, for instance, is the top 500 companies in the US by market capitalization. So if you just take the amount of equity shares outstanding times the price of that share, you get their market capitalization. When you get the biggest ones of those, the biggest 500, that is the S&P 500. That is the algorithm behind the S&P 500. It is just the largest companies by market capitalization. Okay, I'm going to get a little geeky, like I said. So a little bit of history. The wealthiest members of our society historically have participated in capital markets and buying company shares. But in the last 2 or 3 generations, a lot of that has changed dramatically, where it was democratized. It was exposed to many more people who could actually invest in company ownership. And they can invest a much smaller amount that actually made sense for their own personal budget. So I'll shed some light on how things were so that you can better understand how much more affordable and accessible they are today when you're thinking about investing your money and finding financial health, and then even going the next step to figure out, how do I feel wellness in the way that I'm aligning my investments with who I am? So we're going to start with kind of just the fundamentals, and then we'll get back to values. So Stock and stock exchanges date all the way back to the 1300s. So companies needed funding. You kind of hear about the discovery of America and the West Indies and the trade organizations, and financial security exchanges popped up in Europe back in the 1300s, like I said. The New York Stock Exchange was founded in 1792, and there were tons of regional exchanges. If an individual wanted to buy stocks, the opportunity was there. They usually had to know somebody or get connected through a broker. And then stock participation remained really small and really limited to kind of the ultra high net worth of the country until the 1920s. The 1920s, not 2020s, the 1920s. And the reason that people began investing in the 20s is because the dollar didn't hold its value. That was when the stock market crash happened in 1929. And people, just like, actually, we just had this very long decade and a half of very low interest rates. Was it a decade and a half? About? And so because people weren't making interest on their money being held in the bank, they sought out investments elsewhere. Same thing that happened in the 20s. So people wanted to put their saved money into instruments that would grow over time, and they would pay for a portion of that publicly listed company or some company they could get access to, and they would redeem it later, presumably at a higher market value. So fast forward to more recent history. Let's say you bought a stock in a company called the Pink Heart Company Limited, and you bought that stock in the 1980s. And if you wanted to buy that stock, you would probably go and talk to a stockbroker who might have found you by cold calling out of the phone book, which is what my dad did in the early 80s to find his clients. And when you worked with that stockbroker, you would go into his office. It would usually be a him. You would pay a commission to buy that stock, usually about $45, but it could climb much higher depending on the size of your order. And you could have also bought a bond or another type of asset, but for simplicity's sake, we're going to stick with stocks that incur a broker commission. So what about mutual funds? Mutual funds that pool assets for investment purposes have been around for hundreds of years, but they really captured the public's attention in the 80s and 90s because people really liked this idea of diversify my investments for me. I don't want to just eat lettuce. Give me a salad. Like, give me a salad of different stocks and allocations and things that I actually want to try so that I could balance out my own risk in the way that I'm allocating to different types of assets. And what mutual funds enabled was you could actually create that salad regardless of your investment size. So you don't actually have to go out and buy each of those instruments. You make one transaction, you buy one asset that actually has all of the different diversified assets in it. So mutual funds allowed for that. Instead of buying one share of Pink Heart, you could participate in a diversified fund that had Pink Heart along with many other assets. If you wanted to buy a mutual fund in addition to a commission and other potential fees you would pay on top of that commission, you would also pay between 0.25% and 1.5% of the amount you invested to the company into the mutual fund itself, because it had operating expenses. The mutual fund had a whole team of people that were picking what goes into that salad, and you have to pay them for that. So all of that would be available to you as the buyer, kind of buried deep in legalese in the prospectus of that mutual fund. Then you had ETFs. ETFs sprang out of index mutual funds created in the 70s and 80s with innovators like John Bogle, who was the founder of Vanguard, and they launched their first public index mutual fund in 1975. There were other leaders in the space that followed in the 90s, including State Street Global Advisors, SSGA, and BGI, which was acquired by BlackRock in 2009. That's iShares, if you're familiar with iShares. And an ETF is a type of mutual fund. It's traded like a stock on an exchange, and it has intraday liquidity and pricing with lower minimums. So you're still paying for the fund who actually manages that fund together, but usually the amount you're paying is much lower because they're making different types of money in arbitrage. It gets really geeky here. We don't have to get into that level of detail. But with an ETF, they actually have a tax arbitrage. So they translate more cost savings and efficiencies over to the buyers. Today, we have over 3,000 ETFs available in the US. For context, I think that's about the same number as stocks listed on the New York Stock Exchange, maybe with the NASDAQ, but there's as many ETFs as there are stocks today. For the most part. And they offer all kinds of exposures to stocks, bonds, commodities, sectors. Like if you just want to invest in, energy, then you can buy an ETF that just gets you into energy. Many of you probably already know this. I'm just creating some context before I get it back into values. There's a new column emerging to the right. I'm getting back on track here. So as we think about how markets have evolved and how you get into wealth accumulation, to find financial health and wellness, we're actually creating a new category. And that column to the right of this chart, the name of it will be defined eventually, but right now many are calling it direct indexing or personalized investing or custom portfolios. It is basically the concept that back through history, if you wanted to find wealth accumulation, there was a lot of barriers to actually buy assets that would accumulate. Those barriers have come down, but you're still only getting kind of what's available on the shelf. And what's happening now is this new emergence into a new reality of, wait a second, I don't want what's on the shelf. I want you to create my own salad because I like on my salad tomatoes, but I don't like cucumbers, but I do like these. Please give me some of extra of that. That's the future. And that's really, I think, when we talk about our money and our values, what I'm most excited about. So thank you for bearing with me as I went through that somewhat painful history lesson. But I think as we talk about financial wellness, it's really important to kind of give you a little bit of historical context. We're looking to help you accumulate wealth. And I want you to understand, okay, what are my options? Okay, so there's this term that kind of had a rise and a bit of a crash called ESG. You may be familiar with ESG. Many of you may work in the realm of ESG. I'll give you a overview at a very high level. It's also become this term, very simple acronym, has become incredibly politicized. And I'm happy to talk a little bit about why and where if you have questions about it. But over the last decade, people have resonated with the idea of, I want to invest in causes that are related to the environment or diversity, equity, and inclusion, or social justice, or education, or health, somehow align my money and my values. So I think one of the questions to the public is, do they want to try to align their investments with their values? How would they like to do that? When you think about angel investing and venture funds, they often have a thesis. I'm really interested in this topic. I'm going to actually invest in this particular thing that's aligned to my thesis. I wonder if anyone here is interested or is an angel investor and would be open to kind of sharing your own perspective on your approach to angel investing and how your values play a role in your decision making. So anyone an angel investor and kind of want to talk about values as you think about investing in companies? Even if you're not an angel investor, your input is welcome.
Hi, it's Colleen. I totally am about the environmental. It's the number one problem of the world. So anything environmental is definitely a must. It's essential. Actually, it's not. Anyways, environmental, which is why I started my business. Very concerned. So 100% in on that. I just wanted to say I had $150,000 in RRSPs. I found that they were useless because all they ever did was take their commission off of it. So I made no money. It
Do you
stayed
mind
the same.
explaining what that is for everybody?
It's retirement savings plan in Canada. And I had the 150, it stayed at 150 over 10 years. I became so, the banks, you talk about the bank ripoff, was crazy. They were taking like 10,000 in commission yearly on that. It was ridiculous. I would never, I don't tell my children to do any of them. I
Yeah.
said, invest in yourself, in your education and whatever. None of that stuff worked. I even tried different things in the bank. I detest the RRSP whole concept. Everyone did it and it wasn't good. Anyways, thanks.
I'm so sorry to hear that. And
Yeah.
I do feel like a lot of people have stories of distrust. Here's what I did. I listened to what they said and I wasn't served. You didn't do what I asked you to. You know, I was looking for accumulation in return and I didn't get it. Or I was looking for whatever and I didn't get it. I'm sorry to hear that.
Well, what they said to me is, I said, well, I want to retire with that money. And they go, well, that 150 has to grow to over 400,000 for you to live off of it as you do now. It never moved. I could not believe it. And how many people have been sucked into that and don't pay attention to, they just think it's going to grow and it doesn't grow. And it was amazing what happened there. Anyway,
Oh, you muted a little bit there at the end.
yes, I just wanted to emphasize that I think people need to pay attention to you assume somebody's looking after your money when you put it in a program, and
Yeah.
they're truly not.
Uh,
It's their income.
yeah. I'm so sorry to hear that. Um, Let me kind of share a little bit. Well, let me actually jump back one before I share you. I'll share the racy picture again. Um, but I'll get back there. So we talked a little bit about ESG. We talked a little bit about why it's important. In an ideal world, I think the question is, what kind of power would you like to have over your investable assets and how they're allocated? And if you could control which companies were or were not part of your portfolio, how would you want to do that? How would you want to actually take control? So let me explain my racy picture here. So in the US, oh, here's my stats that I was fumbling with earlier. In the US, there are 2,385 companies listed on the New York Stock Exchange. There are 3,431 companies listed on the NASDAQ. So the total across both of these exchanges is about 6,000. 6,000 totally public listed companies on these two big exchanges in the US. Any guess at how many private companies there are? Toss out a number. How many private companies are there in the US? LLCs, C Corps. Definitely not zero. There's lots of, I own a private company. Anybody? Ideas? 6 million private companies in the US. So 6,000 publicly listed and 6 million private companies. So the S&P 500, for instance, or other broad-based indices give you limited exposure to those publicly listed companies and only the top 500 if you're buying that particular index. There's tons of indices and tons of ways to get your exposure sliced and diced. And when you talk about your investments and values, what are some of the things that make people uncomfortable? And that's where you come into, well, what's in these pictures? Some of the things that make people uncomfortable might include unsustainable energy producers. That's your top left. Weapons producers, weapons manufacturers, the people that are responsible for high capacity, guns and the components. Private prisons, as you think about the bottom left. So there's a lot of uproar and discussion about, should a prison be private? Should it be an actual for-profit venture that somebody makes money off of, or should it be funded by the government? On the bottom right, you've got gambling companies. Do you want to be invested in gambling? And then in the middle, you've got adult entertainment. You may not feel like any of these are a problem for you. And the entire point I'm trying to make here is that values and your money are something to consider. And when you think about what does that actually mean to me, going back to the initial part of our conversation, money is a tool. Money is a way to actually help you do something in the world. It helps you fill in the blank. It helps you support your family. It helps you donate. It helps you build your business. It helps you support your children. It helps you fund education. It helps you whatever it is. There's all these different things. When you're investing your money, you literally become an owner of the company that you're investing in. That is why I gave that whole story about the Pink Heart Company. You literally become a part owner of that company so that you can find a wealth accumulation opportunity and have your money working for you. So I would love to kind of just pause here and ask people about, when you think about your investment and your values, what comes to mind? Does it seem accessible? Does it seem like it's irrelevant? Are you just looking for performance? There's a whole lot of things that I think hold people back. Part of it is, I don't know how to do this. I don't even know what I would do. How would I find a way to invest in companies that avoid some of these things? Or maybe I really love one thing and I want to invest in that. So I'm curious just to kind of have the conversation and open it up. Any questions, any thoughts, reflections?
Hey, Marla, I have a question. So, honestly, this is a topic that I'm leaning into. I put it on my vision board for this year. Like, I need to really get in and figure it out. I'm starting much later than I meant to. One of the platforms that I found that intrigues me is called Mainvest, and it's a series of small companies that you would find on Main Street, like restaurants or breweries or something like that. And they're crowdsourcing investments with the idea that that will help to infuse money into, whatever mission or what you're interested in. And then you would get small remunerations back from that organization. I'm curious if you've heard of those platforms, if you think it's effective. For me, that does align with my values where I'm at in the country. It's ripe for investment where there's not a whole lot of main things like, if you go to LA or New York, you think like, oh, everybody's trying to come up with the next biggest, baddest, craziest thing. And here we just need the basics, right? And so to me, that is something that I would be interested in. Anyway, but what are your thoughts about those types of platforms?
Yeah, so I appreciate the question. And let me add another disclaimer. I should have said this at the very top, where I'm not a financial advisor. I don't know you. I don't know your attitudes about risk. I don't know what is suitable for you to invest in, or your capacity to invest in different things. Um, as you think about aligning your money with your values, it's kind of like, do I want to shop on small business? What is it? Small Business Saturday? I prefer to shop in the local bookstore versus going to buy something on Amazon. Like, there is an alignment. That's why I kind of wanted to separate. We first talked about spending in alignment with your values, and then we talked about investing in alignment with your values. Because I think spending, we've kind of learned that game. We understand when we want to spend in alignment with our values, we know what that looks like. It's like the Small Business Saturday. When we invest, I think it's a lot harder. It doesn't really come to mind. People don't really know what to do. I love the concept that you're sharing. I love that there are platforms. And I think what you're saying also really reflects the stat here, in that you can invest in a publicly traded ETF or a mutual fund or even a stock, but you're getting access to 6,000 companies. Now, if you want to invest in a private company, the barriers are often higher. In order to invest in a private company, you have to be what's called an accredited investor. There has been recent regulations to bring down the barriers so more people can invest in small companies and support their community or support small businesses that should have an equal, or that they believe with their values, should have opportunity to survive and compete with a lot of the big guys. And so what you're saying about kind of the alignment of my money with my values and should I work on these platforms? The answer is I don't know. But what I can say is the best path for you to actually go on to explore whether it's relevant for you is to get to know you. It's actually understanding for yourself, what do you want your money to do? What is your risk tolerance? Any investment you make is going to have risk. Anything. Like, it's not like you buy something, you're spending your money, you're going to get something of value in return. Could be a meal, right? But once that meal's gone, it's gone. You spent your money. With investing, you just don't know. You're taking on a risk. It could go up, it could go down, it could go sideways. Who knows? Our RRSPs clearly didn't have a good run. So we learned a little bit about that. I think the question here, Christina, that I would ask you to reflect on is, what are your values? And is everything you've learned about these platforms going to help you align your money with your values? Are there other things you might need to tap into about yourself, including your tolerance for risk, including like what other things could you be doing with your money, or that, you know, that would help you make that decision, that are really important? Because once you know yourself and you have kind of your rubric for operating really clear and confident, then you're free to proceed. It's like, yes, now I know myself, I can take action. I'm going to move on from the racy picture here and start to wrap up. We've got 9 more minutes. Here's just kind of a list of takeaways, and then I just finish and would love to connect with you on LinkedIn or answer any questions. But let me kind of use this last 8 minutes just for a kind of ask me anything reflections on this talk. Aligning your money with your values was kind of the key theme. Reflections and ideas that you would like to share after kind of doing this a little bit of self-work and self-discovery about what brings you joy and what's important to you as you align with your money and your values.